Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, for the AI and Innovation in the Music Industry panel. In particular, today, I'm really excited to be joined by two wonderful colleagues, Hazel Savage from Musiio and Martin Nedved from AIMS. They'll have a chance to introduce themselves, but before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit of how excited we are to talk specifically about how artists, labels, and marketing teams can now start to leverage AI innovation in ways that they never could before, with the ultimate goal of really engaging their fans and optimizing releases amongst a wide variety of other things. So really excited about this topic. We've all spent a lot of time thinking through it. With that, I'll start very briefly with myself and hand the floor to Hazel and then over to Martin. SK Sharma, Chief Analytics Officer at Music at Ingrooves Music Group. I'm so excited about music. I just kind of jumped to the music right away. I'm originally a physicist, actually worked in venture capital and did a bunch of other things and was intrigued with coming on board in the music industry about 5 years ago. And it's just been a tremendous and wild ride. So with that, I'll hand it over to Hazel for her proper introduction.
Thank you, SK. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Hazel Savage, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Musiio. I describe us as an artificial intelligence company for the music industry, but what we really are is we're a data processing company. It just so happens that all the data that we process is music. I've been working in the music industry for about 15 years. I started at HMV, stacking shelves when I was at university, and I was an early stage employee at Shazam. I've worked for Pandora, Universal Music, and I founded Musiio about 3 years ago with my co-founder, who's our CTO, Aaron, from Sweden. And so, yeah, absolute pleasure to be on this panel today. Excited to hear that your background is as a physicist. I think we should get into that as well. I think that sounds exciting. Way more excited than the music industry. We got to somehow throw a bit of that in. But no, absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Martin.
So yeah, thank you. So my name is Martin Nedved, and my background really is in the sync world. I have also been a copyright lawyer for a little bit, and I've been pretty much born into the music business, and I've been working there for over 15 years now, so similar like Hazel. We have that in common, I guess. And mainly I've been working as a music publisher, but I also ran a small indie label. And generally, I'm really passionate about innovation and technology, and in the music business in particular. And that led me to co-founding AIMS, of which I am the CEO now. And what we do at AIMS is quite straightforward, I would say. We enable labels to find similar sounding tracks in their catalogs based on reference tracks. So we are a little bit like Shazam that you, Hazel, said you worked at, but instead of telling you which tracks you are listening to, really we find tracks in your catalog that have similar vibe, mood, or sound. I'm very active also in the indie field. I'm currently chairing the Indies Association in the Czech Republic, and I'm in daily contact with the indie members. So that's, of course, much smaller operation than the A2IM, to which I'm very, very honored to be here today.
Excellent. No, thank you both for that stellar introduction. And I think the one common theme I see here is innovation. At Ingrooves, we've been at the forefront of innovation in the music industry for a very long time. I think you all noticed we recently awarded a utility patent for work that my team has actually done tremendously beautiful things around with respect to audience ID. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, but I love the fact that everyone here is bound by a passion for music, but also a sincere desire to innovate in an industry and just make it better, smarter, stronger, and ultimately more inclusive and accessible to all. So excellent. So I think it's a great way to kick off. I think with that, this first question is fairly broad, and we're all going to have our own perspective on it, and we'll start with Hazel. But curious to sort of get your sense on what you think the role of AI is in today's music industry, relative to where we have been over the last couple of years and emerging technologies and so on. So would love to have Hazel kick it off and then transition to Martin.
Fantastic. And I really wish I had sort of a pithy one-liner for defining AI's role in the music industry, but it's huge. It's a huge topic. And I feel like I could literally talk from now to the end of the panel and I wouldn't even cover a fifth of what we were trying to. But there's a lot of things I've been sort of wrestling with and thinking about ever since I started Musiio about what should AI be used for, and where is AI best utilized? And I remember I gave a keynote in Malaysia back when such thing was possible, and it started out with just a pure definition. What is the definition? What's the difference between AI and machine learning? And of course, we use the term AI because it's more accessible and it's easy to understand, but it doesn't have to necessarily relate to technology or computers. It's the mere act of something appearing like a human behavior that's been technologically created. And so that could apply to robots, it can apply to music AI in our instance. And once we kind of understand that core, I've also spent the last 3 years drilling down on, you know, where it can be best used. And I think we had a lot of pushback when I first started the business around the idea that AI is here to steal people's jobs. That was a legitimate worry 3 years ago, and still a worry these days. And I'm really pleased to say we've never replaced a single human being in all of our implementations. I see AI very much as an assistant, as an assistive methodology. And actually, I'm really lucky to be working with Rolls-Royce at the minute on an AI framework for implementation of systems. And one of the things I'm particularly passionate about is that I think there are tasks AI is fantastic at, and I think there are tasks that AI is pretty rubbish at. So, you know, for example, I always love to tell people what the limitations of AI are. And, you know, our AI can tag a lot of songs. If you show it a Justin Bieber track from when he was 12 years old, it will tell you it's a female vocalist. Now that's laughable to all of us in the industry, but all the AI knows is the pitch of the vocal. And it has no idea who Justin Bieber is within context, what he's done, his career. So AI is very smart until it isn't. And I like to think about the things that we can do using AI that is assistive to humans. You know, having worked in the industry for such a long time, it's my passion that anything I do supports and grows the industry. I'm also not a fan of, you know, technologies that are disruptive for the sake of being disruptive while trying to tear down an ecosystem that has given me my entire career. So that's the kind of framework with which I like to look at AI through that lens. You know, is it something that's not manually possible? Is it physically impossible to, and it is physically impossible to tag 60,000 songs a day with a male or female tag. So that's somewhere that we can help. Is it also physically possible to search through a catalogue of 2 million songs in under 5 seconds? It's not humanly possible to listen to them all. So AI can be an assistive tool. And that's really the starting point for me when I explain to people what we do at Musiio or my personal take on AI.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Hazel. Martin?
Well, I think the easiest answer to that question would be to say that the role is really massive, but to be more specific than that, I think that the way I see the role of AI in music business and the way we see it at AIMS is that AI is really here to help people be more creative and to free them from the boring, time-consuming tasks that they don't necessarily want to do. So instead, I think people should be free to focus on the tasks that they are best at and where they add the biggest value. So I think similarly to what Hazel has been saying, the role of AI definitely isn't you know, to replace the human, to replace the artist. It is instead here to empower them to be more creative, or at least that's where we see you know, the biggest value of AI. And just to give some examples from where we you know, like are operating in the label world, in the sync industry. So typically labels are approached, you know, and asked to pitch music for TV shows, commercials, other kinds of productions. I mean, I think we all know that. And there are now tools, like fantastic tools, like Hazel's and others, like AIMS, that can help to do it much more effectively. And that means instead of, you know, spending hours searching manually for the right tracks in the catalog that can have tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of tracks, you can do it, you know, much more effectively. And then you can spend that time to be really creative, because I don't necessarily think that, you know, going manually through a catalog of tracks that have been poorly tagged because they have been tagged manually or inconsistently before, I don't find that creative. And I don't necessarily think that the people that do that really enjoy that. So if there is a tool that can assist them to be much more creative and much faster in that, well, that allows them and really frees them to do what they are best at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a couple of recurring themes here that are worth, reinforcing for everyone who's watching and or listening, right? Which is disruption for the sake of disruption is sort of silly, right? It doesn't really make sense. I mean, there's positive social and business progress that's made in our industry. And it's really helpful to have outside perspectives. As I indicated, I unlike you two, I don't come from the music industry in terms of my core DNA, but that's actually been a positive thing for us as we take a look at how we can actually build a platform where we can engage fans and actually use methods from physics and statistical mechanics and quantum physics and all these really interesting areas to really help drive engagement, right? Because that's fundamentally where we want to drive value. But I think that's exactly it. The goal of augmentation and intelligence is really intended to be selective, where you can accelerate certain workflows. That's obviously a positive. Where you can free up the creative people that we have working for us to actually do, I don't know, creative things. That's tremendously powerful, right? So to second and third, really what both of you have said, I think that's exactly it. I think it's really seen to me as it applies to the music industry as a way to really go ahead and enable people to be even more creative and even more successful and sort of take some of the boring stuff away whenever it's possible. So I think I'm really glad to hear we're all aligned on that. And moving on to the next question, we've started to touch on this, but I think we talked about some key examples of AI in the music industry, and you all have done a great job of hinting at this, but I'd love to dig a little bit deeper, right? So there are things that we've hinted at that we do currently, but what are some opportunity areas or things that I think that, you think that may be worth taking a look at or accelerating as we go into the next few years? Sorry, Hazel, let's start with you. Yeah.
Sure thing. Great question. Actually, someone emailed me the other day from the incubator community that I'm part of, and they said, if you were going to build another music tech company right now, what would you build? And I was like, that's cheating. That's just asking me for my next big idea. And I said, well, I honestly don't know, because I spend all my time on Musiio, so I don't even know what the latest thing is. And then I went, actually, scratch that. I do know. I would start an NFT company and just start flogging NFTs. But I think that's probably a bubble. So if I was doing a smash and grab, I'd get into the NFT business. But on a slightly more serious note, when I think about how we're expanding and the kind of R&D that we do, one example I can think of, and with myself, for anyone who doesn't know, quite clearly I'm English, but I'm based in Singapore. And so we do a lot of work with Asia, and there is a sort of a different approach to AI and the music industry in this part of the world. And we've got a really big campaign launching in a few weeks that we're doing with their Vans, the footwear company. And every year they run a talent search in Asia. They do all of it, the JPAC, so Japan, Australia, China, all of Southeast Asia. And, Vans are like, let's find the next big Vans band from Asia for the year. And we're working with Vans in China, and they usually get about 20,000 entrants every year. And previous to Musiio, it was just 20,000 people would enter, not all of it would get listened to. And so what we're doing is we're using our technology to be able to find the best of the submissions that are getting sent through. And that's kind of quite a revolutionary approach from the brand and also from the region, because I think AI for A&R is a huge area for growth, but there's still a lot of tentative thoughts around this application when I speak to our European and our US clients. And what I love about it is there's a risk that it won't work, right? And we're a startup, so there's a risk someone wants to do A&R with us and it doesn't work. But even worse, there's a risk it does work. And then it's terrifying, because then we have to think about how we might want to change the way that we do things at a slightly deeper level. But to me, it's exciting to see Asia not being afraid of that and running ahead and doing some exciting things. So yeah, that launches in July this year, and that to me is an exciting future part of the industry, not just replicating, say, the tagging elements and the things that have been done historically, but pushing those new frontiers. But it's funny, because when I started the company 3 years ago, there was a lot of reticence about what we were doing. I feel there's a little more comfort now around AI and music, and I feel like that's just going to keep going. So yeah, I'm here for the ride.
Excellent, thanks, Martin.
Well, you know, I think there are several areas that I think there should be really a lot of new things. One area that I'm watching with a lot of interest is definitely the space of AI-generated music, and I think that's both you know, it's both thrilling and slightly dangerous, I would say, for the music industry. So I think a lot of people are watching that with an interest, and there are some, you know, great examples. Like I think most of us have heard about Aiva, and there are Loudly or Boome, which are, I think, interesting companies that have come out just recently, or at least to my knowledge. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a you know, a huge activity in that area. Though for me, I'm more about asking where can the AI really add value, and I think we have seen a lot of application of AI in the, you know, business to consumer space, into B2C space in the past decade. We have seen, you know, all of the major streaming platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, you know, really adopting and being at the forefront, I would say, of adoption of AI, especially for the music discovery and recommendation. And they have been, you know, I think leading the increase in music consumption and the growth in music business, really. But where I kind of don't see, or I haven't seen as much of AI applications so far, is in the B2B space in the music business. And you know, that's what coincidentally, of course, that's where we are looking at in AIMS, and I think in Musiio as well. And I'm looking at a lot of different, very exciting applications. So of course, there's the, you know, similarity search, there's auto tagging, but there are other companies that are, you know, they are doing automated matching of music with video, automated syncing of music with video, and other use cases. And I think that whole area is going to be very exciting, and that's where a lot of the value is going to be added. Because what you said before, SK, I think this is an area where it's not a disruption just for the disruption itself. It's really in the B2B space. I think the companies really have to prove that they are adding value.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, right? You know, we are solidly in the B2B space, but we Ingrooves, but we obviously have a tremendous amount of work invested. And Hazel, I think you were on a panel recently with my director of data science, Daniel Cowden, who has done a lot of really impressive work with respect to trying to understand, you know, how to use true predictive methods to actually describe and ultimately prescribe actions for how to accelerate engagement, and how that ties into brand affinity, and how we can actually work in a fashion or in a collaborative fashion with brands to sort of understand what their market is. We've invented some technology called smart audience technology that allows labels, and again, this is on the B2B side, that allows labels to actually execute marketing campaigns that are optimized for success with respect to getting people to listen to their music, as opposed to optimizing through some of the third parties, Martin, that you mentioned, you know, Facebook and so on, that are really just looking to optimize for clicks, right? And so I think extensions and optimizations of methodology outside of core fields like similarity matching, which are absolutely essential, but then going into how do we really use this to drive engagement is what keeps me up at night all day, every day. And like I said, we're a bit biased. We borrow methods from physics and advanced mathematics a lot, but ultimately what's going to matter is, you know, is it allowing the artist to be more discoverable, right? However you want to define that. Are people actually able to take advantage of this time of unlimited shelf space and go out there and go, oh, this is interesting. I wasn't necessarily looking for this, but I found this. And we work collaboratively, all of us, with the DSPs as we have to, but we can't rely on them alone, right, to drive engagement. And so I think all the ideas that have been expressed here are incredibly powerful to me, because they're very much looking at the future of how to make artists even more successful. And that's what we're all about ultimately. So that's great. Actually, so along this line, I'd love to maybe transition a little bit and talk about And this is a broad topic, and I'm aware, but music monetization, right? How can we actually extend some of these conversations and some of the methodologies that we have to drive greater monetization within the music industry? For years I've talked about IP monetization. Hazel, you talked about NFTs recently. We'll kick off with Martin this time, but would love to get your thoughts, Martin, and then Hazel, around how we can actually drive increased monetization opportunities with some of these technologies and methods.
Sure. So. You know, I operate very much in the sync industry, so sorry for that. I will still stick to what I know. And you know, what we see with our clients, I think I can talk about two trends that our clients are really excited about. And one that is, I think, really clear to everyone is the massive increase of video production that's been happening. You know, both in terms of UGC, user-generated content, and the professionally created content. You know, that's been happening over the years. You know, just the explosion of video as a format on YouTube, on TikTok, and elsewhere. And I think the really good news in that is that this also means there's a huge increase in demand for music to be used in those videos. And I believe that that rapid growth will only continue. And you know, looking back, you know, 15 years ago, when I was starting in the music business, synchronization was really still a niche, you know, in the music business. You know, it was somewhat secondary area that not everyone was really looking at. And now I think every label has a pretty much clear strategy and a focus on sync. And you know, if you look into the news, there are, you know, companies actually founded just to do sync. And you know, without naming, some of those companies are now attaining, you know, hundreds of millions in valuation, or if not even more. And if you look at what they are doing, all of those leading sync companies are looking at AI one way or the other. They are looking at AI, you know, to help them a bit with you know, helping to predict what their users are going to be looking at. They have AIs, you know, AI tools helping them select the right music. And one thing that's pretty clear to me is that, you know, all of the companies that will want to compete in the sync space will have to work with AI, and they will have to define a AI strategy that they will be working with. And there's certainly a huge opportunity in this area for labels of all sizes. So that's one trend that I really see. And the other trend that I see, you know, over the past years is really about working fully with the whole catalog, and especially, you know, with the large back catalogs that a lot of the labels and publishers have. And that's another area where AI has been doing, you know, there's been a huge progress in the tools that can help labels work with the back catalog. And it used to be, I think, pretty difficult to work with that, because once you reach a certain size, it's almost, I would say, impossible to really work with the whole catalog, because once you reach size of thousands and tens of thousands of tracks, well, it becomes impossible for one person in the company to actually really know, you know, by heart the whole catalog. And then it becomes, how do we manage that? And I think it used to be really difficult, but you know, the progress that has been made in all of these companies that we've been discussing, and as I would say, also one area that we didn't touch that much, is the different platforms that have helped really, you know, administer these catalogs more. And it's making it much more easier to work with the whole catalog and to uncover some of the hidden gems and really exploit fully all of the tracks that all of the music companies have. And that, of course, means more revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Hazel, interested in your thoughts.
I was just going to say, I mean, I love the sync industry as well. And because when we started out 15 years ago, I don't know if it was called the sync industry then. It used to just be, we're going to license a song. Like, prime example, Journey's Don't Stop Believing in the final episode of The Sopranos. Journey were like a hard no on, we don't let our music on any TV show. And they had to take the cut round to the lead singer of Journey's house, play it to him so he could sign it off. And now you got people falling over themselves to be like, you know, playlisted on a Netflix show or something else. And it just reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which was, back in our day, it was called selling out. And now, if you're not selling out, it's because nobody asked. So I'm obsessed with, like, you know, the way that the sync industry has changed. I think it's obviously it's one of the biggest growing parts of the music industry as a sector. But also today I read, and this is going to date me in case anyone's watching this back in the future, but YouTube just announced that last year they did $4 billion to the music industry. And I was like, oh, they did 4 billion. Daniel Ek announced 5 billion. The whole industry was only worth about 22 billion. So I'm like, whoa, this is a concern that there are so few companies contributing to the total value. That puts YouTube and Spotify over 50% of all the money in our industry. That's where it's generated. That's worrying. That's a concern, because you want a nice diversified portfolio. But one of the things I am sort of probably more excited about is companies talking about changing the revenue model on a very micro level when it comes to streaming payouts. And I'm certainly not an expert. I know most AI people are mathematicians as well, certainly true in our company. And when I met Daniel, your colleague, on the panel the other day, it was like talking to my co-founder. And I absolutely love that our industry has started attracting in brilliant minds from diverse sectors. I think that's the future of the industry. And I'm fascinated to watch these proportional payment models come in. You know, if I pay my $10 a month and all I listen to is Journey's Don't Stop Believing, a very real risk. Why aren't my $10 going straight to Journey? And then obviously maybe we look at the label splits and the publisher payouts, but the idea that possibly none of my money will go to the artist I listen to is, I think there's a disconnect between the way the audience thinks it works and the way it actually does. So as I say, I'm just grateful there's smarter people than me innovating when it comes to payment models, but it's always been a challenge for the industry. Even back when I was at Universal, 10 years ago, 95% of our revenue was coming from Apple downloads, and that was not considered a good thing. So, you know, a more diverse industry, and as you say, the growing sync segment will hopefully shift a little bit of that balance. But it's it's certainly interesting. Well, and it's going to be interesting for the next 10 years to see what happens, SK.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as always, I think, you know, a couple things worth revisiting, right? One is, I think there's always a bit of a concern about any sort of monopoly or duopoly, or just say small concentration. You know, as I mentioned, we work very collaboratively with all of our retail partners, as we all do. But I think there is opportunity there to really sort of understand the possibilities for diversification of revenue and participation. I think, you know, a lot of people, as you said, Hazel, has spent time thinking through the pro rata model and modifications that are potentially more equitable to a wider swath of people. And that's where, you know, I think, going back full circle to some of the things Martin talked about with respect to sync, you know, I remember coming into the industry 5 years ago. One of the first things that occurred to me was, well, you know, and to Hazel's point about being a scientist, Daniel was my first hire, by the way, on my team. So when I came in, Daniel was one of the first people was the first individual I hired. And we've now, since, as you've seen, we've built out this massive team of PhD mathematicians and physicists, starting with myself. But what we spent a lot of time thinking through was event capture, right? Are there extrinsic things that happen, particularly in the sync world? And to what extent does that actually drive on platform engagement? To what extent does that actually drive consumption? We've spent a lot of time building attribution models and doing all kinds of really cool things to really go back and reassess the gut, as it were, right? I mean, you all have so much more experience in the music industry than I do, but it's been humbling and rewarding to be on both sides of this, to say, well, let's test the gut. Let's actually drive this type of experiment. And so a lot of what we've done at Ingrooves is bring a very rigorous hypothesis-driven approach to if this, then what, right? Where do we, as our CEO Bob Roback is fond of saying, where do we know where to pour gasoline on the fire, right? To accelerate it even more, to actually drive the kind of engagement we'd like to see. Again, all coming back full circle to driving engagement for the artist and success for the artist. And in some cases, particularly in the indie space, simply just discovery of the artist, right? Ensuring that the artist has a fair chance to be heard, for lack of a better way. And so I love the fact that, again, we're also unified with respect to really driving discovery through all these different methods that exist, and building new ones when they don't exist in the industry, perhaps outside of Spotify, and now Ingrooves. So it's great. One of the things, Martin, I'd love for you to touch on a little bit more, and Hazel, for you as well through Musiio, is I guess starting with Martin, how does AIM's API actually leverage actually leverage AI for the business, right? I mean, I'd love to get a better sense of what you do, how you're engaging with folks in the industry, and what some of the future things are on the roadmap as well.
Right, absolutely. So first of all, I think a lot of companies are using the word AI or machine learning just as a buzzword. So, and I think we have all seen that. I mean, it's either to get their valuation up, or it's maybe to hype a little bit their clients. I think for us, what we are doing, AI or machine learning is absolutely essential. And frankly, we wouldn't be able to do what we are doing without it. And from the beginning, we consciously focused on one thing and one thing only, and that was making the best music similarity search for the sync industry. And that's, I believe that's our specialty, and that's where we really excel at. And so what AIMS actually does is it uses AI to analyze every single track in a client's catalog, and it then identifies the different characteristics of it, hundreds of them in each track. And then this really enables us to search within that catalog based on similarity with the reference tracks. And just to be clear, that we do not use any metadata or tags. So this is all done using the underlying audio only. So I think this is where really the little bit of the revolution lies in. And this all means that our clients can fully leverage all the tracks they have in the catalog, and they can do it really fast. And AIMS also discovers tracks that previously couldn't be found. I think we've touched a little bit on the bad or inconsistent or just plainly missing tags. So tagging is something that probably everyone in the music industry knows about. They have experienced it, and it's a big pain point really. And I think the really problematic part about it is it's so subjective, right? So my happy isn't necessarily your happy. And so if I'm going to be searching for a track that's happy, I'm going to also get tracks that are not necessarily happy for me. So we are trying to work around this by actually trying to use I would say objective approach, where the AI analyzes all of the tracks, and then it kind of gets its own feel on what the vibe, mood, or where the similarity really lies.
Yeah, absolutely. And anything, Martin, that we can look forward to in the coming months or years on the product roadmap side? Or
well, there are always a lot of things that we are developing. So I mean, we are very much research and development focused. So I believe that we are totally at the beginning of this. But we have a couple of things that we have done recently. We have done things where you can search based on multiple tracks, which leads to some really interesting things. You can kind of create, I would say, hybrids, or clones, or what if song A and a song B had a baby, and there you get your track, which I think is really difficult to do without this kind of technology, because how do you even go about finding that with tags? Or we have looked at how to search for similar tracks without looking at the vocals. So we have worked with some sound source separation companies to make sure that we can take out the vocal from the reference track and then find similar track just using the music part, not the vocal part. And the thing that we are now really working on the most is auto tagging, because we have been approached by a lot of our existing clients, and it is something that they really are looking at, and it's something that they seem to be slightly struggling with. And slightly is an understatement, I would say.
Well, thank you for that perspective. It's helpful. Hazel, would love to get your thoughts on what you're doing at Musiio and what the roadmap looks like. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, where do we start? So essentially, and since this is a kind of an indie panel, the way I describe our technology is we're taking audio files themselves and we're turning them into mathematical transformations, spectrograms. And from those, we're able to identify a lot more information. And I've got a composer on my music team, and he described it in the most perfect way, which is if you imagine looking at a waveform, we can all see where it fades in, where it fades out, where the drops are, where the repetition might be. but you can't tell the genre by looking at a waveform. You can't tell whether it has a vocal. So what we're doing is we're going from looking front on to like looking up and over and down at the waveform, where all of that information is stacked. And we're then able to tell you much, much more about the track. So the core technology that underpins our tagging, our search, and our playlisting is the ability to turn an audio file into something visual that a computer can translate. And once we can do that, there are lots of things we can do with it. And funnily enough, search is one of my favorite products that we also sell, because I felt it was the most revolutionary when we built it. Because I remember the last job I worked at, we had one curator on my team, and it was his job to make playlists every day based on newly uploaded UGC. And he could listen to 200 tracks a day, find nothing, playlist nothing, and that could go for 4 days in a row. And I was like, surely there's a better system. Surely there's just something that could filter down by genre or by quality or by any other number of characteristics, so you at least have a good starting point. So search was actually the first ever product that we built, but very, very quickly we found that the traditional music industry were like, we want tags. And I was like, yeah, but search works without tags. And they were like, yeah, but we want them. We want them. And I was like, well, give the customer what they want. So we reverse engineered our search technology to be able to do tagging, because it seems like even though you can perform a search without it, the industry has spent a lot of time and money invested in tagging processes, and they're not willing to give it up, even on my very reliable word that they should. So we kind of reverse engineered it into tags, and then we use it to generate playlists. We use it to generate talent searches. We use it to generate search algorithms. Once you can understand an audio file without having to listen to it manually, there's a lot of things that you can do with that track. And so in terms of innovation, actually, bizarrely, one of the biggest areas that we're innovating in is scalability. So up until the start of this year, 2020, we were processing about 100,000 tracks a day for our clients accumulatively. We're now doing over 2 million tracks a day. And the kind of back-end infrastructure that you need to be able to do that kind of volume is considerable. And luckily, my co-founder has two specialities, AI and back-end scalability. So we're really dedicated to making a very secure, very stable service. And, you know, it's so fun to me to see how far we've come. 3 years ago, before I'd get on a sales call, I would have to text the dev team and be like, can you sit online and make sure the demos work while I'm trying them? And now I don't even question. Now I can pull up my screen any time of day and everything's flawless. So, you know, we're working on a lot of back-end scalability, but that's not that sexy or exciting. So, but it's true. So what can I say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that perspective is helpful. Yeah, we spent a lot of time focusing on our scalability and our platform early on to allow us to have a highly extensible platform on which to build insights and true predictive and prescriptive AI. And I think, you know, Martin, you also made a good point. Again, I'm a bit biased just being an actual scientist, but yes, unfortunately, AI and ML is thrown around quite liberally these days, and much to my dismay at times when I'm having conversations. And so it's been really nice in this conversation to really talk about the discretization of certain methods and processes, but also really focus on the impact and what it means for artists. So this has been a really wonderful and stimulating conversation. I'm really glad we had the opportunity to have such an immersive and collaborative panel. And I really just want to take, you know, a couple seconds here to thank Hazel personally, thank Martin personally, and of course, everyone who has taken the time to listen and tune in. And I know I speak for all of us when I say we just can't wait to be back in person again doing this, hopefully very soon when it's safe to do so. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks, SK.
Thank you. Thanks.